This is Michael Sutherland, and he works at Senior GIS Analyst for Cushman Wakefield. He's worked with GIS both in public and private sectors since 2016 to create and maintain geospatial databases and fulfill project requests for commercial real estate brokers. He also runs Sutherland Maps, his freelance cartography business. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his wife Maggie, their two dogs, Bam and Buzz, running hiking and hand drawing maps. Okay, Michael, take it away.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'll set up. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to the group today. It was great getting to go and meet many of you at the Esri UC this summer. And before I go farther, can you see my screen? Is it all good? If it is, just tell me yes, because
all good. Point, yeah.
Yes, good.
Screen. Yep.
Good.
Yep. Looks great.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just great getting to connect with the group. This summer at the Esri UC, I've known about Christians in GIS since I was in college many years ago, but it wasn't until the UC where I got to meet some people in the group. And in this profession, it's just wonderful to meet other Christians who work with GIS. I will tell you, I have not met terribly too many people in my time working in it. So it's a great encouragement to me. So as we get into the presentation today, I'm going to be mainly talking about my freelancing cartography GIS business, whatnot. But before I will go and get into that, I'm going to share a little bit about what I do at my full-time job, kind of using part of a presentation I did for Penn State's GIS Day a few years ago, and then just talking a little bit about the theology behind why we should care about making beautiful maps. In one sense, I was really encouraged by Mark Gadney's presentation a few months ago, who I know he's on the call here, but just thinking through what is the theology behind why I do what I do. Everybody has a reason, and actually fleshing that out was really good for me. So Sutherland Maps, exploring God's creation one map at a time. This is the tagline for my business that I've had, and really every map I make, I've just wanted to, in one sense, visualize God's creation, the places where I've gotten to go and visit, explore. It's been a great tagline for me. So a little bit about me. I already mentioned that I graduated from Penn State University, 2016. I majored in geography with a GIS minor. It was a wonderful school to go to for somebody who loves geography. I knew going into college I wanted to study it, so it was really the best place to study near me. As I said a little bit earlier, I live in the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania. So this is about an hour and a half north of Philadelphia and about an hour and a half west of New York City. So we're kind of in this in-between land where you can really go to any major metro area pretty easily. And also, as Lauren said during my introduction, I've worked in the public and private sectors. So yeah, down there in the bottom left is my wife, Maggie, and then our two dogs, Bam and Buzz. Bam is the black one and Buzz is the gray. And currently, they are sleeping on two office chairs behind me. So if there's any barking, I apologize. It's just me back here today. And then, in the GIS field, I think it's always fun to go and start off with a little meme about, what others think we do. It's much more than just country names, as the old Animaniacs song would say. What my mom thinks I do in drawing maps is actually true based off today's presentation. But GIS cartography, whatnot, is much more than Google Street View. Our coworkers, they may think making maps is easy. It takes a lot of work. And I'd like to think that I make really wonderful art, and I think that's true. But on a day-to-day basis, I can be as frustrated as anybody and want to be like Ron Swanson, throwing a computer into the trash can when Pro or whatever software you use may or may not crash. So the next two or three slides are just going to talk about maps I make in my current work. In commercial real estate, one major thing we do is making what's called logo maps. Really what you're doing is putting retailer logos or other company logos around a proposed site location. If you're marketing a property, this is an invaluable thing to go and learn how to do. So this process is partly split in between Arc Pro and Adobe Illustrator. So if you want to get into commercial real estate with GIS, learning how to use Illustrator is very valuable, because I would go and set up the roads and the aerial base in GIS software, but then go and do the rest of the work in Illustrator. And it is possible to make, I think, better looking logo maps. Some are not the most visually appealing, but so I'll spend some of my days doing this, not as much now. I can spend much more of my time making what's called drive time maps, things like also referred to as commute studies. If you're trying to market an office to a client, trying to justify why should they move, will it save their employees commute time? Or if they're trying to figure out a general location, plotting the geographic center of the employees and saying, what is your travel time to that general spot? This is more of the bread and butter of what we do. And for all the maps that I make at work, the color schemes or whatnot that I use, this is company branding. So I wouldn't always call them my first choice in colors, but it's the framework which I work within. And I think if you work at it, you can make generally visually appealing maps. But as you'll see with my work later today, I don't tend to use gray all that much, which is the background of this map. And also for the team, I'm our team's data manager. So I will go and dig around for all sorts of spatial data. On the left are just a few of the links where I tend to go and pull data from. I pull data from many other spots. It can be a lot of fun. I mean, and as you see in the picture, even the Penn State Nittany Lion enjoys mining for geospatial data. All the shape files, KMLs, what have you. So that's a little bit of what I do day in and day out. Now I want to get into the theology behind making maps. We all have a why for why we do what we do. And really a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, it could apply to any kind of work that a Christian does. But at least for this presentation, I'm trying to gear it a little bit towards mapping. So why should we care about making beautiful maps? Well, if we go all the way back to creation, work existed before the fall. In Genesis 2:15, it says that the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And since this was pre-fall, pre-sin coming into the world, this tells us that work was actually meant to be a really good thing. Even though now that sin has entered the world, it can just be frustrating at times. As I talked about earlier, GIS software can crash. In a perfect world, it would never crash. But we should care about work because it's meant to be a good thing. And in making beautiful maps, we're called to honor the Lord in whatever we do. We're called to work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, as Colossians 3:23 says. And whether we eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God, as 1 Corinthians says. Something that I've also thought about too, just in how we do our work. Hebrews 13:15 talks about offering up a sacrifice of praise to God, which, according to the verse, is the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name. And whether we're doing mapping work or whatever other kind of work, we can acknowledge that God has given us our talents and abilities, and that we want to honor him because we have been redeemed through Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And we have so much to be grateful for. And that's something that I think differentiates how Christians do work versus just the secular world. And lastly, think of the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, when the Lord entrusts skills, abilities to us, and we invest them to honor him. He will give us more, and I think we can see that the Lord can bless our work when we just entrust it to him. A few other things. Now, I don't know if many of us are familiar with the story of Eric Liddell, a missionary to China. I tend to feel like most people really know about him through the movie Chariots of Fire, which is a great movie, by the way. But he has a very famous line, and he says, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." And I've always loved that line, partly because I enjoy running. But I think for me, and maybe you as well, I think we can feel God's pleasure as we do mapping work. I know for me, hours can fly by, and it's not super tedious. It's joyful. And believe it or not, mapping work does exist in the Bible. I thought this was kind of fun. In Joshua 18, this is when Israel's getting closer to the Promised Land, and they're going to look over it from a distance. Joshua says, as the men started on their way to map out the land, Joshua instructed them, "Go and make a survey of the land and write a description of it." Now, this may be more of surveying. I don't know. I mean, who knows? I mean, surveying, mapping, you could say that the two are intertwined. But I thought it was just fun that you can find mapping work in the Bible. If only they had GIS, if only they could have done it on their phones, they could have compiled so much data very quickly, but they unfortunately could not. All right, so that was a lot of text, I know. The rest of the presentation, it's going to be mainly pictures. So thank you for bearing with me through a lot of text. I think it's just important for setting the background for everything else. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I had a few quotes from Tim Keller's book, Every Good Endeavor, which I thought was also a helpful book. The first quote says, if you do your work so well that by God's grace it helps others who can never thank you, or it helps those who come after you to do it better, then you know you are serving the work and truly loving your neighbor. And I think that's an interesting concept of when we do our work well, whether it's in the public sector, private sector, we can really care for others by doing it well and not just being lazy about it. The second quote says, it is often hard to get Christians to see that God is willing not just to use men and women in ministry, but in law, in medicine, in business, in the arts. And I'd probably throw in there, in GIS as well. That is the great shortfall today. we don't need to do a full-time ministry role in order for the Lord to use us. Now, it's still wonderful if you can serve the Lord and say in GIS and in a ministry setting. That's wonderful. But it's more than just ministry work. And the last one, I think, is another poignant quote. How does Christianity affect an artist's work? In short, the gospel worldview equips the artist, as it does the journalist, for the unique combination of optimism and realism about life. And I thought this was extremely poignant because in GIS, we're going and visualizing typically some sharp distinctions in data. So, demographic differences for wealth, education, race, what have you. I think we can be optimistic yet realistic about the world and the maps that we make because we can go and see the sharp divides, but then know that the Lord cares about people on all over the world. It's not just the poor or the rich, people of certain income classes, races, whatnot. But we can still talk about how the world is far from perfect because of what sin has done. And ultimately, how can we map in a way that honors the Lord, honors God, just using it to point others to Christ and give glory to Him. Okay, that was all the text that I had. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but now it's going to be mainly pictures until the end. So get ready. My first map. What you see here, it's not the greatest picture. I've never scanned this. And this was part of a large scroll of an imaginary town that I created. But I made this back in middle school. And in hindsight, this was a terrible design. No transportation engineer would ever build it. I don't even want to know what it would actually look like modeled in real life. But I loved traveling. I loved roads and cars and whatnot, and I just had a desire to go and create my own really complex highway interchange, and then after that, a bigger town. And yeah, as I said before, I look at this now and I think, wow, this really doesn't look that good. But this is where mapping work really began for me. And just using my imagination to draw, draw interesting things, the world how I thought I wanted it to be. Even though this suburban interchange with endless parking lots is not necessarily what I would ever draw today. But this is more or less where I began, and from there, just the hand-drawn cartography continues to evolve. So the town that I grew up in high school was called Hellertown. It's not too far away from where I live. This was a project I worked on for a year or two. I didn't really keep track of it too well. And this map took up the entirety of wall space. In my room. It's about 5-ish feet tall and a little bit wider than that. And as I was exploring the town, I was just getting into running. I was going to go across these rolling fields and running down all the town streets. I just wanted to map it out. And so I used kind of what I had on hand. I didn't have great aerial imagery. This was back in probably 2010, so Google Maps was only coming out. And as the top picture, as you can kind of see on it, you can see some lines in it, which is because I used lined notebook paper in order to draw out the map. Something I would never do today. And quite frankly, I don't know why I decided to use it, but in hindsight, it's fun. I wanted to capture the homes, the parks, the roads. I wanted to draw my high school in depth, which is in that bottom picture. And then all the trails that I would spend my time running on, which is in the picture on the right. In many ways, it's just I was really grateful to be living in the town I was, and just grateful to the Lord for that. Even though, I think I didn't fully understand the gospel until college. I grew up in the church, but I think I was still just generally grateful for where I was living. And so, before I get too much farther, how do I create these maps? And I'll have another slide for this a little bit later on, just due to a newer technique that I use. But my main way of doing it in the past was I would typically take individual sheets of paper, typically 9 by 12 inches. You can kind of see that in the bottom right picture. That way I could easily add on to the map. Before ever really beginning, I would go and sketch out a general layout. You can kind of see that vaguely in the left picture on the left. And I would go and test out different color schemes. You can see I'm testing out different shades of yellow and green and orange and whatnot, just to see which one would work best. And then I would typically go in and define a reference scale. So what do I actually mean by that? You can kind of see in this top right picture, this is a little snip of a map I'll show later, but it has a grid. And so if I knew that a block was square, I could easily draw a square on a sheet of paper. I would then measure that distance, and then compare it, and then go and measure that same area on Google Maps, figure out how far it was. That way I could say that this block was in real life a quarter mile long, and the area that I'd drawn out was a quarter inch. I could say a quarter inch equals a quarter mile. And that would give me the reference to continue building out the map as I would go along. I've definitely improved upon that since I first started. But that's how I just really began doing it. So this was one of the first maps I ever made in college. I was a part of the club cross-country team, and I wanted to try making a map for our little invitational. And so thankfully the club president said yes, and I just worked to get it onto an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and trying to differentiate the different routes based off of the relatively limited amount of colors that I had. For one of the first smaller maps I did, I think it turned out really well. I mean, in hindsight, you'd see that text isn't always the flattest. Things aren't centered exactly the way I would want, and I didn't really have graphic software at the time to try cleaning things up a little bit. But I got to go and do this for a club that I was a part of at Penn State, and this was the beginning of getting to share the gift God's given me with others. During my time in college, I spent about a year making a map of State College. This is another one where don't let the size of this on the screen fool you. This is 6 by 6 feet. It took up an entire wall. And it captures really everything in town. I mean, State College is a college town, and when you go and live in a college town and you're walking and biking everywhere, you really get to take in the sights, and I just learned the town really well. So inevitably, I was going to make a map of it. you can kind of see on the left some of the details of it. Beaver Stadium, where Penn State football plays. This is now out of date since they're adding on to the stadium. But just working to make the tiniest little tick marks for the rows of seating. Yeah, this was the beginning of trying to do more detailed, intricate work. Or on the right, trying to draw in the downtown businesses and the Penn State buildings. Yeah, and now that this map is out of date, it's sort of frozen in time. Businesses change, things always change. But it was getting to capture a place that I loved at the time when I lived there. And this is really where the Lord opened my eyes to the gospel, seeing my need for Jesus in a way that I hadn't growing up. So in many ways, I look at this map of State College, and it just brings up memories of my time there and how grateful I am for the Lord's work in my life then. The first one I did after college was of Philadelphia. It's about 2 by 3 feet, and there are no real road labels on it. I thought it would make it too cluttered. So really, what it's trying to visualize here is different land uses. Whether it's, you'll see a lot of orange for commercial space, dark green is more of forested areas. You can kind of see brown for more of the trails in the center picture. But I've gotten to spend a lot of time there. And fun enough, I made this before I started working outside of Philadelphia. So when I started my first job, a lot of my coworkers really loved seeing it because this is where they did their business, in commercial real estate. So it was just a lot of fun to get to make, drawing in all the airport runways down here, the rail line to the airport, or just drawing in Center City, Philadelphia, as intricately as I could. Which still to this day, a real challenge is just getting your pencil tip sharp enough to draw in the details without things smudging. That's something I think I still struggle with. But, it's been getting better. Now, this map of the Lehigh Valley, this one might be one of the closest ones to my heart because it captures where I've really spent most of my life. In many ways, it was a love letter to the area. There's a little bio up here on the left that kind of talks about just how grateful I am to the Lord has blessed me with living in this area, and really when I look at this place, I just see the way that the Lord cares about the people and wants them to come to know Him. So look at it. And this is very similar to most other maps that I've made, drawing in the different land uses typically. These are just 2 close-ins of towns in the area. You've already seen Hellertown in the prior map. But also the town of Emmaus, these quaint little boroughs with just quintessential Americana. Now, something else I wanted to do too with these maps, I've been inspired by Purple Lizard Maps, which is run by Mike Herman. He does a lot of trail maps of mainly Pennsylvania, but he's always thrown in rather fun copyright language on the map to not steal it. So I think on this map at the time, back in 2020, I threw in a little Full House reference. I was like, how rude of you to go and try stealing the map that I've created. I thought it was kind of fun. So I try and throw in little Easter eggs like that. Just been kind of inspired by other cartographers. This map of Acadia was one of my more recent ones. This was one of the first where I wanted to try playing around with different label colors to try and have them blend more into the map. Or I should say blend in, but also stand out. So I've gotten to travel up to Acadia a couple of times. It's beautiful, and so it was inevitable I was going to make a map of the area. This one is also a 3 feet by 4 feet map, so it's big, but I've played around to shrink it down after scanning. And you can kind of see those labels I was talking about. So, highlighting the mountain peaks in this greenish color with sort of a white text buffer around it, you could say, and the same for all the coves. The trail labels and road labels, those have always kind of stuck to the colors of what the symbols are. But just trying to make a map of a beautiful place, I mean, that's always been my goal to others. I mean, the hope is that when people see the maps that I create, that they just see God's handiwork in me and are pointed to go and find their hope in Him. Now, I do need to use my words with that at times. I can't just assume that everybody can just believes in God because they see a map. But it's a way that leads into that. And then I also drew in downtown Bar Harbor, quaint little town. But with these things, labeling has always been the real struggle. There are things I would change in hindsight, but overall, I'm still grateful to have gotten to capture just this place in time. Now, I told you that there was going to be another slide on how I create these maps. And that's because I've changed more recently to just trying to use one large sheet of paper. Typically, I'll try and use an 18 by 24 inch sheet of paper. That's as large as I can get in one sheet. And so I will go and use software, GIS software for this, and kind of visualize a general area in a map. So you'll see in the bottom left, this is an ArcPro layout showing Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I've put grid lines in all throughout the map. And the goal here is to try getting 20 plus control points, saying that this town of East Petersburg is at 12.65 inches on the x-axis, 11.21 on the y. That way, I can go and put these control points in and then fill in the gaps. I don't have as much real wiggle room to add sheets onto the maps with this newer method. So getting quite a few control points is the way I've been trying to do it now. And I'll still define a color palette and the symbols beforehand, like I did for the prior process. But I like the way I'm doing this now. It forces me to not just add onto a map endlessly. The first one I did with this process was in Pennsylvania, so the state I live in. And this is your quintessential reference map, showing things like the parks, roads, general city boundaries, whatnot, trails. And this was one of the first where I was actually able to do a little bit of cleanup work for little smudges or whatnot in a tool called GIMP. Think of Adobe Photoshop, but free. That's just helped me clean up the maps a little bit, but not trying to add a ton to it after I'm done drawing. You can see things like the trails with the dashed brown lines, little highlights like the Little League World Series, which is up in Williamsport, up around here. And then I decided to go and do one for Michigan, but just the lower peninsula, because it fits better on an 18 by 24 sheet of paper. I have a lot of family in Michigan, so it was about time I went to about time I made a map of the place. The most interesting thing about this map, I think, is that I was trying to highlight all the lighthouses in the state, which you can begin to see over here towards Detroit. You can kind of see a lot more of them in this bottom image. But the goal is just to show the cities, the towns, the general reference material. And I would say that you can go and use this map for navigation if you really wanted to. I don't have all the road names. It's just more of the state routes, whatnot. But it is possible. And here you can see the lighthouses better. You can see the ferry routes, more of the rail trails, but also another little Easter egg, things like that. I passed by the town of Sparta over the summer, and I've seen parts of the movie 300 before, and when they yell, "This is Sparta," I don't know. It makes me think that whenever I see a place called Sparta, I have to yell it out, and it's fun. It's trying to have fun with it. Also, a little shout out down here to Calvin University. I don't want to call it Calvin College. I'm so used to calling it that, but for their great geography department down here too. If it wasn't 12 hours away, I might have considered going. All right, just a few more things. I just want to talk through a few commissions I've done for people. This is a map of Ridgewood, New Jersey. I have a running friend who has run all the roads in the town of Ridgewood, New Jersey. So he asked me if I could make a map of all the roads. And there's a tool called City Strides, which it basically links to your GPS watch and compiles all the data. So basically, I was able to use that to make what I call a graduated symbol map of all the roads in Ridgewood that he had run. And the friend really loved it. He took the scan and then put it on some canvas, and it turned out really well. So it's one of the first of a few commissions. This is one of the first that's not hand-drawn. This was just a general reference map made in QGIS of countries and bases where a former vet was flying in and out of. Very basic, but it worked for what he wanted after we kind of fleshed it out. Now, this is one of a local nature preserve. I originally made it in GIS software, which is this left image, but then it kind of inspired me to make a hand-drawn version of it, which was also, a lot of fun. I'll actually present in a few months on this at Pennsylvania's GIS conference of how to make the map on the left, and just kind of encourage people to go and make their own maps. And these maps are not used by the county, Lehigh County, which manages the preserve. It was just for my own personal enjoyment, at least for this one. So a few other things. I've been trying to sell maps, and I've had a decent success at it. I sell online on my own website, sutherlandmaps.com, and also on Etsy. Maps of many different places, and you can kind of see down here the logo too. I didn't just create that recently. I've actually had this since high school, of all things. But when you learn software like Illustrator, it makes it easier to make a logo like that. So for my business, is much more of word of mouth. I go going to craft shows and talking to people, setting up tables, and in many ways just sharing the gift God's given me with others. That's the real thrill, for me. It's an entry point to talking with them about the gift God's given me. And nobody's ever said anything discouraging. Everybody, loves maps. Whether or not they buy a copy is a different thing. But I'm getting to do what I love, which is I don't know if everybody can say that. Now, what I'm working on now is maybe the map which has the most illustrative features. This is a map of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. It's almost done. And I just wanted to try showing the preserved farmland in the county. and then throwing in a bunch of other fun little things with it too. A chicken, an Amish barn and buggy. I personally really enjoy putting a pretzel in as the North Arrow. I just really love pretzels, and it's pretzels is one of the main things snack foods they'll make in Lancaster County. So I thought it was fun. You can kind of see more of the detail here of this was a progress shot of recoloring the map. So you can kind of see this is much bolder versus this area which hadn't been recolored. And then the chicken and the pretzel and all that stuff. So that's all I had to share with you today. As much as doing GIS work full time is great, I'm very grateful that I get to do hand-drawn maps and some other GIS stuff on the side. So right here's my business card. It has the QR code to my website, and then just other contact information. I'd just like to thank you for the time, for listening, and with that, I will take any questions. And let me go and maybe for now just stop presenting. That way I can actually see people. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. That was inspirational. Actually, it kind of makes me want to go home and pull out the crayons. Obviously, I probably wouldn't want to draw with crayons too much, but yeah. So, do you take any inspiration from any of the older school kind of hand-drawn maps? The ones that I'm thinking of are the ones that have a dragon in the ocean and that sort of thing. Have you taken any inspiration from that kind of stuff?
Sure. There's one newer cartographer. His name is Anton Thomas. He's made a map called Wild World, where it has well over 1,000 different animals on the map all throughout the world. And so if I can add in some more artistic details, I think it only really helps. And for me, this is a skill that I'm still trying to learn. I can go and take inspiration, I think, from some of my family's artwork. My grandmother made many paintings of chickens, so in many ways it's kind of an homage to her. But definitely, many of the older maps were just generally more artistic. I think I can definitely see the older maps and draw inspiration from them. While I was in school, Cynthia Brewer, who has basically wrote the book on you could say color theory maps. She went and shared some of her work that she had from grad school of actually drawing maps by hand, which I thought was the coolest thing. But I appreciate the question, Michael.
Just a quick comment. I love the detail and love your creativity. It's just fun to see what you've been up to.
I appreciate it, Lauren.
Another question from me. I just was searching on the internet here for, I remember there's a tool that linked to Adobe Illustrator and Esri software, but this was in...
Go and use pretty often. So just in terms of, there are some things that are not as easy to do in GIS software. So in order to go and clean up a map, exporting it out in something like Pro, that's how you would go and do it. And typically for my full-time work, a lot of marketing people will want Adobe Illustrator files and maps. So at the bare minimum, I'm exporting I'll map out to this different file type.
I keep asking questions because I keep thinking of things here. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think Tino was raising his hand. Tell me
Okay,
if I'm
yeah,
wrong.
let's go
wrong there.
to Tino if you're still got your hand raised. I don't see it.
Oh,
I mean, it's not raised.
Yeah, I had put it down because I eventually started thinking that maybe it was a silly question.
oh,
But
it could be.
my question, and this is from somebody who my experience is all GIS on the computer, not really cartography or geography. So as you were speaking, I kept wondering what the first step even is to come up with your own map. So say you talked about all the maps that you did of, say, your hometown or places you visited. How much of that relies on existing maps and maybe aerial footage or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to use aerial imagery pretty often. I think, I tend to have dreams or ideas about mapping out a place. And for me, it started off with using things like Google aerial imagery, where I would actually go and do printouts of Google Maps aerials back in 2010. I used way too much of my parents' color ink, but oh well, that there's forgiveness. So yeah, I mean, but in terms of where to start, I mean, I look back at some of my early work, and I don't really think it was that great, but I don't know, I think as you work to cultivate a skill, it gets better over time. I've learned more about myself of just trying to slow down and have more patience, not rush it. And really, in many ways, I think earlier maps, I would just get into work and never really acknowledge the Lord in it. So typically, before I start, working on a map, just each time I'll work on it, I'll just ask for the Lord to go and guide my hands as I'm drawing, ask Him to help me slow down and not rush. But really, but just in terms of where to begin, I would just say, find an area that you like, try visualizing on Google, and then just take a sheet of paper and give it a shot. It's not the best answer in the world, but that's just how I've gotten my start in doing it.
I think about 3 minutes left.
If I can make a comment on that last thing, I was in the School of Landscape Architecture, so we talked a lot about a mental map, and that doesn't mean you're mapping out whatever, but it means taking what you know of a local area and just going, can I draw it? And I think that's an interesting exercise too. Like, do I know the road network, enough to kind of think about it? And of course, Michael's been using Google, so he kind of has this template that he's already working off of. But I think it's a really interesting exercise to go back and go, okay, can I draw my area, and what would I draw? What roads would I do, and how accurate would they be? I think it's a really kind of an interesting exercise. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear you say that, and I think of British cab drivers who have to go and memorize what's called the knowledge, which is memorizing the mental map of London. I mean, it's fun to try and route to your destination in your head versus using Google, but having a mental map of a large city like that is just something else. So that's just what it reminds me of. Yeah. Any other questions? I know, Lauren, you said we're almost out of time.
Do you have any future maps you're thinking of?
Working on the one of Scotland, or working on the one of Lancaster. I know my wife and I will travel to Scotland in May, so maybe Scotland. That's kind of what I've been thinking, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, these projects take months on end, sometimes closing in on 100 hours of work. It takes a while, so I don't jump into a project lightly.
Lauren, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
I know it's going to cut us off, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark. Michael, I'm sorry. Thank you. Great to hear, and love your sharing and getting theology and everything in there too. Yeah. So, yes, I like Michael Ritter. I say yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Lauren, and the time.